Millions of Americans might want to stay indoors this 4th of July. Extreme heat is covering much of the nation. The humidity and record-breaking temperatures are a recipe for hazardous conditions. And on top of that, dozens of wildfires are burning in the West. Our Mark Martin is on this story.
On this Independence Day, for millions of Americans, it will feel like temperatures in the triple digits. In Boston, authorities brought in large fans to cool the crowds for upcoming 4th of July festivities.
You need to stay hydrated.
The scorching heat brought a commuter train to a halt in Philadelphia, knocking out the power.
Stuck on train now for almost 2 hours, and it's probably about 120 degrees on this train.
In New Jersey, rescue workers helped evacuate 50 seniors from a nursing home after the air conditioning stopped working. The temps soared above 100 degrees. Out west, the heat and dry winds are fueling more than 40 wildfires in nearly a dozen states. The spring fire in southern Colorado spread to nearly 80,000 acres. It's the second largest in state history. This social media footage shows one of the more than 100 homes destroyed by the flames.
It looked like Hiroshima had another A-bomb dropped on it.
Officials say an illegal campfire started the massive wildfire. In Utah, leaders there declared a state of emergency. The governor urges common sense this Independence Day.
Only do a campfire in a designated campground. Don't leave fires unattended. Be careful with fireworks.
Mandatory evacuation orders have been issued for thousands of homes in the fire zones. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. President Trump spoke with 3 more potential Supreme Court nominees Tuesday. He's now talked with 7 possible choices and plans to announce his decision Monday. The president says he wants a justice young enough to serve on the court for 40 to 45 years. Emergency teams are still looking for the best option to rescue a soccer team and coach from a cave in Thailand. 12 boys and their coach have been stranded for more than a week in the flooded cave. Thai Navy SEAL team members say there is no rush to bring them out as they are safe where they are, as they work to find the safest way to exit the cave. The boys could end up swinging 6 miles with specialized breathing masks to escape. There are new reports American pastor Andrew Brunson could soon get his Independence Day from Turkey. He's been held hostage in the Turkish prison as a political pawn since 2016. The Turkish government wants the U.S. to hand over a controversial Islamic cleric in exchange for Brunson. But now the U.S. Congress has taken steps to sanction Turkey for jailing Pastor Brunson. As a result, reports from inside Turkey indicate he could be released after his next hearing, and that's scheduled for July 18th. For more on these stories and others throughout the day, you can always visit cbnnews.com. Federal agents have uncovered new details about an Ohio man's plan for terror attacks in Cleveland during the 4th of July celebrations. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales has that information, plus a look at the extra security measures across the country for the holiday today.
Here in the nation's capital, the 4th of July celebration will bring thousands to the National Mall. The fences are already up and you can already see an increase in police presence, just like in other cities across the country, like New York and Boston.
I want to remind everyone that the 4th of July is a family event. Be smart. If you see something, say something.
There's no specific credible threat to this 4th of July celebration. That said, we understand it is a symbolic American holiday.
Law enforcement know attacks like the one foiled in Cleveland can happen anywhere. A 30-page complaint detailed how Demetrius Pitts wanted to carry out the attacks. The feds say he not only wanted to have bombs explode at Cleveland's 4th of July celebrations, but also at a church, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and other beloved Cleveland landmarks.
He looked for locations to park a van that would be packed with explosives. He talked about taking targets like St. John's Cathedral off the map, and just yesterday he discussed giving remote control cars packed with explosives and shrapnel to the children of our military uniform members.
Pitts allegedly wanted to hit Philadelphia. The affidavit said a map with multiple landmark targets was also found. Agents say Pitts thought he was meeting with another al-Qaeda sympathizer, but it was really an undercover FBI agent.
The undercover and Mr. Pitts had a lengthy conversation. Pitts again, on his own, expressed his allegiance to al-Qaeda, his desire to participate in a terror attack on July 4th in Cleveland, Ohio.
Pitts remains locked up, awaiting trial. Authorities say best advice: if you see something, say something. Your tip may prevent an attack. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, how a legendary revival, the Great Awakening, played a key role in the birth of America. One of the keys to the creation of the United States is that it was founded after a massive revival in the 1700s, a revival that left a radical mark on almost every founder. Paul Strand brings us this look back at a key chapter in American history.
America's revolutionary fathers weren't just nominal Christians. They were profoundly influenced by the New World's first revival, the Great Awakening. Reverend Eddie Hyatt tells how it hit from the 1720s to 60s in his book, America's Revival Heritage. Colonial pastor Jonathan Edwards, known to pray and study his Bible 13 hours a day, watched radical revival take over his hometown in Massachusetts.
The way he describes it is just like one day God invaded the town of Northampton. The town seemed to be full of the presence of God.
The bars emptied out and Christians' homes filled with people anxious to be saved and know God.
He said if you came across someone who seemed spiritually indifferent, it would be spoken of as a strange thing.
Then the powerful English preacher George Whitefield brought his fiery sermons to America. Scorned by the established church, he preached salvation to huge multitudes outdoors. Crowds from 10,000 to as many as 30,000 showed up.
Entire towns repenting and turning to God.
Whitefield stayed at Benjamin Franklin's home while preaching in Philadelphia, and Franklin wrote of the revival's impact.
From being thoughtless or indifferent about religion, it seemed as if all the world were growing religious, so that one could not walk through the town in an evening without hearing psalms sung in different families of every street.
Whitefield lifted up a special prayer for the colonies that would make a huge difference in their revolution and future together.
They would not live as 13 scattered colonies, but as one nation under God.
And indeed, the Great Awakening became the first national event the scattered colonies experienced as one. It unified them unlike any time before, just in time to face the mighty British Empire in war. The revival also shaped the Founding Fathers' core vision for America, that God sets men free. It's their natural right to have liberty, and each is made to rule with Christ. Its influence is all over their Declaration of Independence, U.S. Constitution, and Bill of Rights. As he studied the founders, Hyatt found example after example of how deeply this awakening influenced them and their Christian values. Take Thomas Jefferson, for instance.
He signed all presidential documents in the year of our Lord Christ.
He sent Christian missionaries to one Indian tribe and gave them federal funds to build a church. He also attended Sunday services held in the House of Representatives. Some scholars even doubt the first president's faith, but a Quaker named Isaac Potts living near Valley Forge saw George Washington's faith up close during that cruel winter that almost froze his colonial army to death during the Revolution.
He said, I tied my horse to a sapling and went quietly into the woods, and to my astonishment, I saw the great George Washington on his knees alone. He was at prayer to the God of the armies of heaven, beseeching him.
The anti-war Quaker Potts later wrote,
and he says, such a prayer I never heard from the lips of man. We never thought a man could be a soldier and a Christian. But if there is one in the world, it is Washington.
At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the delegates fought and bickered so bitterly the convention almost broke up. But then Ben Franklin stood and began to preach.
He says, the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid?
Then Franklin beseeched them to pray together at the start of every day. After that, an atmosphere of peace and reconciliation came upon the founders.
And they were able to proceed and to finish their job of hammering out the American Constitution and Bill of Rights, and in a context of prayer.
60 years after it began, the Great Awakening still influenced the Founding Fathers and continues to benefit our country today. Paul Strand, CBN News.
Even though Christianity had a profound influence on the early days of America and its leaders, many students today are learning very little about the faith of our fathers. We'll have that story right after this. When we celebrate leaders who helped to make America great, it's important to remember men like George Washington joined a remarkable group steeped in an education and faith that helped to create this free nation. But as Paul Strand reports, many of today's children are not learning about the true forces behind these leaders.
When you look at the miracle of the American Revolution, a critical combination was God's timing plus the leaders chosen to carry it out. Teaching about the intense education and deep curiosity of our founding fathers is author Jenny Cody's passion.
They studied ancient civilizations, and I don't mean just like AP history, you know, and dates and facts and stuff. They studied how governments work. They studied ancient Rome, ancient Greece. They studied philosophy, how men thought.
Cody wrote The Voice, the Revolution, and the Key to better connect our younger generation with America's founders.
My life's purpose is to get kids excited about history and make them fall in love with it.
In this book, the author uses talking animals to help the future leaders when they're children. One is a young Benjamin Franklin reading in depth about ancient leaders' character, virtues, and vices.
Plutarch's Lives, Benjamin Franklin, 11 years old, that was his favorite book. Have you read Plutarch's Lives? I just read it to write this book, and it's pretty complicated.
Young George Washington wrote in longhand 110 principles put together by Jesuits about how to live right and be a gentleman.
What 12-year-old today do you think would take the time to have a journal and to handwrite out rules of civility and civil discourse? I mean, he wrote down these principles so he would learn them.
Colonial society at this time was pretty much based on the lessons and literature of Christianity.
Children were learning their ABCs based on Bible characters.
Today's public schools not only don't teach out of the Bible, they don't teach how important Christianity was to most of the founding fathers. Or they suggest founders like Washington and Thomas Jefferson were deists, believers in only a distant and uninvolved God.
Yet Washington stated after surviving a battle where his coat was punctured by numerous bullets and 2 horses were shot dead beneath him, "I was saved by the miraculous care of Providence that saved me beyond human expectation." Patrick Henry, the man who shouted, "Give me liberty or give me death," stated, "There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations." As a young man, Patrick Henry was right in the middle of the First Great Awakening and the battle for greater religious liberty in the colonies.
The war for religious freedom was happening under his own roof.
Henry's father and uncle were Anglicans in Virginia's state church.
However, his mother, Sarah, was a bit of a rebel, and she went with this new Great Awakening dissenter movement.
She would take her son to hear evangelists preach in this first national revival. The experience helped form him into the mighty orator eventually labeled the Voice of the Revolution. His voice for freedom and stand against the high taxes of the Stamp Act helped ignite the revolution.
A decade before we even declared independence, he was the first one to speak up against tyranny. That's when Sam Adams and the boys and the Sons of Liberty was like, look at these guys in Virginia. We need to be that bold. And so isn't it amazing how one voice speaking up for liberty against tyranny can change the world?
And he joined many bold leaders educated for just that moment in time.
They understood that liberty is precious because it had been oppressed, over the centuries, and they studied it. And so because they studied what worked in history, they could smell a tyrant coming 3,000 miles away, and they were ready.
While Cody also points out their failures, like Patrick Henry owning slaves.
I'm showing his struggle with slavery. Where he says it's a lamentable evil. I cannot justify it. I cannot believe I'm a Christian, yet I do this. There's no excuse.
But she finds it horrible that schools are shying away from teaching the great and good stories of America's first decades and its founders just because of their dark side.
To the point where I heard recently that some school curriculums are going to start teaching in 1866. Oh, let's just skip over the whole founding of our nation, because it's too painful.
Cody holds patriot camps with kids and often asks what will happen if children don't learn their nation's history.
They said we'd lose our future. And I said, whose responsibility is it to keep telling the stories of our history? And you know what they said? It's ours. So if kids are willing to own it, let's just teach it to them.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Critical lessons for our children to learn. Stay with us. There's much more of CBN News Watch coming up, and it's coming up right after this. Millions of Americans will be celebrating the 4th of July today with their families, but some people may be worried they won't be able to join in those celebrations again in the years ahead as they get older. That's because so many people are afraid of aging. They think it means losing their independence, their memory, and their mobility. But it doesn't have to be that way. Lori Johnson introduces us to a woman who proves it's never too late to turn back the clock.
At age 61, Barbara Hannah Grufferman feels happier and healthier than many people half her age.
We can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it.
You might find it hard to believe that until about a decade ago, Barbara lived like a couch potato.
The last time I had worked out seriously was back when Jane Fonda was doing those tapes, you know, Feel the Burn and all that stuff.
By middle age, she put on weight, felt sluggish, and believed her best years were behind her.
And I was starting to feel, is this what turning 50 is all about? And it was a very upsetting moment for me, and it was a very scary time for me.
In the midst of her depression, she chose to take a little walk.
I put one foot in front of the other. I literally took my first step to my whole new life. I didn't realize it then.
The walks started happening more often, became longer, and she started mixing in a little jogging.
I was starting to lose the weight. I was starting to have more energy. I was just starting to look better and started to feel, for the first time since turning 50, actually positive about my future.
That positive feeling led her to complete 5 marathons, write 3 books, including her latest, Love Your Age, becoming an AARP ambassador, and getting off all medications.
Doctors say regular exercise means we can ditch a lot of the pills we take, like antidepressants, blood pressure medication, and sleeping pills.
It also reduces the risk of chronic diseases like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, according to the Cleveland Clinic's Dr. Michael Roizen.
Well, it's never too late until you're 6 feet under. So it's never too late until they're putting dirt on top of you.
In his book, Age Proof, Roizen cites research showing exercise can significantly strengthen our immune system.
Yeah, this is really strange because no one ever expected this.
Scientists now tell us our ability to fight off everything from the common cold to Alzheimer's is largely determined by the bacteria in our gut.
And believe it or not, exercise was one of the great things at changing the bacteria inside you, we don't know why, into being much healthier.
But not just any exercise.
Researchers figured out the least amount of exercise we need to do to achieve the maximum health benefits. It involves 4 types of exercise.
10,000 steps a day, which can be measured on a fitness tracker, 20 jumps each morning and night, 30 minutes of resistance training 3 times a week, and 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a week.
Doing 20 minutes 3 times a week of things that make you sweat in a cool room. That's what we call cardio.
As spokeswoman for the American Osteoporosis Foundation, Barbara feels especially passionate about resistance training, which can mean lifting weights or using your body weight, as in push-ups or planks. That, along with calcium and vitamin D, strengthens bones.
This is critical because people, when they fall at an advanced age, can be debilitated for the rest of their lives. And that is something that I think about.
While exercise isn't the only anti-aging tool, it's often the first.
Because I was feeling so much better and motivated to live a healthier life, I decided to, investigate what should I eat.
Barbara switched to a plant-based diet, avoiding sugar and processed foods. So while aging is inevitable, don't give up on life. Walking, cardio, and resistance training can help you avoid many of the pitfalls of getting older. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
With that, it's time for your Wednesday Word, and I point you to Scripture. The 103rd Psalm declares, "Praise the Lord, my soul, who satisfies your desires with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles." Remember, God promises your latter will be greater than your past, and that's a biblical truth that stands true for you, no matter your age. With that word, be sure to make this a wonderful Wednesday. That's it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And we'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a wonderful 4th of July, everybody.